Week 7 NFL recap. Let's get into it. Kicking off the show, we have to discuss the resurgence of the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, even last year making the Super Bowl and losing, and the year before making it and winning it, the Kansas City Chiefs have not looked the same since they lost Tyreek Hill. They've won Super Bowls, they've won a lot of games, and their most winningest season was last season, but they didn't look right. You know, just the eye test tells us we know they win games with Tyreek, without Tyreek, with... It doesn't matter. If Mahomes is playing and Andy Reid is coaching, they're going to win a lot of games and be in Super Bowls, lose some Super Bowls. Their floor is the AFC Championship. We know that. But this Chiefs team, even though they're 4-3, they started off 0-2. They look scary. Scary. I mean, look, they beat the Ravens handily, my own Baltimore Ravens. And some people are going to say it's a health thing. It wasn't a health thing. The Chiefs were better on that day on offense and on defense. And that was without Rashee Rice. Now that they have him in the lineup, this offense is dynamic. On defense, they still have Chris Jones leading the pack, and the defense is looking good. It's not as good as it was the last 2 seasons where they were a top 5, top 10 defense that was very formidable. It's still a good defense. I'd still say it's a borderline top 10 defense, but when you've got one of the best coaches in the NFL, a top 10 defense, you've got the best quarterback potentially of all time. We're going to find out soon. You got Kelsey, you got Rice, you got Worthy, you got all these weapons. I mean, all these weapons. Hollywood Brown. And look, I hate to talk about the Super Bowl this early on. The Kansas City Chiefs are now the favorite to win the Super Bowl at plus 550. And I'm going to be honest, I think that's good value. Look, I think this Chiefs team is probably a 50-50 shot to represent the AFC. I've got the Chiefs option A, 50%. I've got the field. Yes, I said the field option B, 50%. Now, does Vegas agree with me? No. They've got the Kansas City Chiefs about plus 225 to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. And look, I don't scoff at it. When you got 15 teams competing against one, that's not really 15. You know, there's some that have already been essentially eliminated. But when you've got 5, 6, 7 legit teams versus one team, yeah, I get Vegas isn't probably going to have the Chiefs minus 110. But look, representing the AFC, I think it's legit a coin flip. The Chiefs versus everybody else. And I just think this Chiefs team it's dynastic. They've already won 3 Super Bowls. I would not be surprised if they add a 4th to it. And Mahomes is on the Brady pace. He's even a little bit sped up. Look, if Mahomes can win a Super Bowl this season, we got to have some conversations about. He's not passing Brady. He's not passing Brady. People are going to debate it. They're going to say, "Oh my gosh, he's not passing Brady." What he is doing is, in terms of being on pace to pass Brady, if we're just looking at the first 8 to 9 years of their career, Mahomes would have passed Brady, if that makes sense. The first half of the career, if we're assuming they're going to play, let's say Mahomes plays 18 seasons, the first half, he would have been better than Brady's first half. And speaking about the Kansas City Chiefs and their, Super Bowl likelihood, we've got the Indianapolis Colts, who might actually end up getting the 1 seed. I've done all this talk about the Chiefs being so dominant and so good, and I think they're going to make the Super Bowl, but the Colts have a 2-game advantage on the Kansas City Chiefs, and kind of a sleeper game that nobody's talking about, a 1 o'clock game in Week 12. It is the Colts at the Chiefs. Now, look, I'm going to take the Chiefs, and it's a couple weeks out, so anything can happen. There could be injuries. The Colts can go on a 2 or 3 game losing streak. The Chiefs could go on a losing streak. I'm not saying definitively, but the Colts have the Titans, the Steelers, and the Falcons, and then they have a bye. So there's a very good chance the Colts win. I'd say probably 2 of those 3. Look, the Titans, you should win that one. Steelers, Falcons, you probably win one of those, lose the other one. And that would put you at 8-2 going into Kansas City. Now, you don't need that game. The Colts could lose that game. The Colts could still easily win their division. 8-3. You probably need 10, maybe 11 wins maximum to win that division. Depends on how you do with the Jaguars. If you drop both games to the Jaguars, you'll probably need to get to 11. If you split with the Jags, you can probably get 10-7. So the Colts, even with a loss at KC, they'd still be fine. But if they beat Kansas City and they open up a 3.5 game lead with the tiebreaker over the Chiefs, that's monumental. Number 1 for home field advantage, because let's be honest, if the Colts are going to beat the Chiefs and if the Colts are going to make it to the Super Bowl, they need to have home field advantage. I'm not hating on this team. I think the Colts are a good team, but there's something about this team that it feels like things need to go right for them. And if they're outside of Lucas Oil Stadium, they could win. Could the Colts go into Buffalo? Could the Colts go into Cincinnati? Could the Colts go into... Yeah, they could beat these teams. They could even beat Mahomes, hypothetically, in Arrowhead. But come playoff time, you really want that bye week. You really want those home games. If you got to play those elite quarterbacks, Josh Allen's, the Mahomes, the Burrow if he's healthy, Lamar if he's healthy, you want to be at home. And that's a pivotal game. Also for the confidence. I mean, if you can beat Kansas City, especially if it looks dominant, if you do one of those games, where it's just 37-20, a thumping, the offense looks good, the defense looks good, the special teams looks good, I think that's going to build a lot of confidence, It's not a sure thing. The Bills beat the Chiefs all the time in regular season, and they don't get it done in the playoffs. So it's not a guarantee, but that Week 12 game, it is going to be a big one. A big one. Let's move on to the next topic. And that is the Dallas Cowboys, a team that I predicted to be sneaky. Now, I will admit, I did think they'd be sneaking in a different direction. This was pre-Micah Parsons trade. I thought that the Cowboys would have an average defense and above average offense. Their defense is below average, so not far off on that, but the offense is electric. And this Cowboys team can score with anyone, legitimately anyone. They are now 3-1. One of the few, the only team that is exactly 500 through 7 weeks. And look, the Cowboys, they're not going to make it to Super Bowl, let's be honest. People are going to get excited about them. They're going to talk about, I trust, the quarterback face-offs. Do I trust Dak or do I trust Jordan Love? And there'll be people that get cute with it and say, I think I trust Dak over Jalen Hurts, and I trust Dak over everybody. They're going to do these quarterback face-offs and just say, I believe in Dak. And look, that's not going to happen. Dak is good. Is Dak a tier 1 quarterback in the NFC? I say in the NFC because, look, he's not on Mahomes' level. He's not on Allen's level. He's not on Jackson. He's not on Burrow. Is Dak in that upper echelon? Is there anyone definitively better than Dak in the NFC? Maybe Stafford. Maybe Hurts. I'm a big Hurts guy. Maybe Daniels, but he just beat Daniels. Look, I think you could, and Goff as well, and Jordan Love, I think you could make an argument that Dak is on par with those guys. I think it's tough for you to make the argument that Dak is the best quarterback in the NFC. I think it is fair to say he's on that echelon. He got Pickens, who's hungry. He's got a lot to prove. You got CeeDee Lamb, who's just a stud. I think this Cowboys team can be kind of that frisky. They're the 6th seed, and they just put up a 40-burger in the wild card round. Now, I will say this. The Cowboys' upcoming games are a gauntlet. They play the Bucs, Packers, 49ers, and Rams. Whew. Good luck. Good luck. They'd be lucky to go 2-2 out of that. And look, 2-2 is fine. If you go to 5-1, I mean, you're 500, but that's 7th seed. If you're lucky, depending on tiebreakers, you did drop one game to the, tiebreakers won't matter for the Cowboys because they have a tie. So tiebreakers will kind of be irrelevant for them. Unless it's the Packers. Then if it's the Packers, then tiebreakers do matter once again because they could finish with the same exact record. But they've got a tough stretch. Look, they've scored 43 times, and in one of the games they didn't score 40, they scored 37. So this team, they can put up points, and they'll be a very, very exciting. Hopefully they make the playoffs so we can see them maybe play the Packers again. Them versus the Bucs would be a phenomenal. I mean, they play the Bucs now, but that'd be a great playoff game. So Cowboys are exciting. I don't think they've got Super Bowl potential, but they'll be a great team to watch. And another NFC team who the Cowboys just lost to is the Carolina Panthers. And what I'll say about the Carolina Panthers are they are just good enough to not get everyone fired. And it's kind of that art of, let's say you're in college or high school and you're just doing enough to pass. All you got to do is pass your classes. You can get a 70. Well, you can get a 69.5 and have it round up. The Carolina Panthers do just enough. Last year, Bryce Young got benched. He comes back, does just enough, just hanging on to where it would feel weird to draft a quarterback. The Panthers could have drafted a quarterback. They could have signed a quarterback. Last year, it would have felt weird to draft a quarterback. It's just like, the fans with how he came on at the end of the season. He was just good enough. And I think that's what they're doing once again. is they're just good enough. Bryce Young will be starting next year. They're going to go 8-9. I can feel it in my bones. This is an 8-9 team. The coach will be back. The quarterback will be back, obviously. Most of the key pieces will be back. They're going to run it back. They're going to re-sign all the players. Make a few minor tweaks and say, oh, we're just on the edge of it. And honestly, as good as the Panthers have looked, as frisky as they have looked, I don't think, kind of similar to the Cowboys for different reasons, I don't think the Panthers are a legit playoff contender. I don't think the Cowboys are either, but at least the Cowboys have a formidable offense that if they play the elite offensive teams, they can get a shootout and maybe win. I don't think that's the Panthers' route to victory is getting in shootouts, but I think the Panthers are a decent team. I feel 8-9, 7-10. 7-10 gets into that weird category where Bryce Young's probably gone. If you can get into 8-9, especially if you can win over half your games, 9-8, I think they'll probably keep the job. And you've got the Bills and Packers coming up, so that doesn't look good. If they can win one of those games, if they can beat Josh Allen, or if they beat both of them, then this Panthers team is legit. If they beat one, it's like, okay, yeah, they're still frisky. If they lose to both, it's like, okay, we know the ceiling. This team beats bad teams. They beat most average teams. Well, be beating half of average teams, and then they lose to the elite teams. So Panthers, frisky, not great. Cowboys, kind of same deal. And they just played each other and had a very competitive game. So that kind of checks out. Joe Flacco, he is ageless. Look, I'm a Ravens fan, as you can see with Lamar Jackson behind me. I love Joe Flacco. I watched him win a Super Bowl for the Ravens. Crazy playoff run. You know, he was Joe Cool, played phenomenal. And I predicted the Bengals, if you guys watched my video from last week, I predicted the Bengals to beat the Steelers. Felt like a kind of a game where Bengals just get it done. I didn't have any analytical, we can't even analytically discuss it because we haven't seen Joe Flacco play yet. But, I think this is a team, it's really interesting because they're 3-4 now with a win over a division foe. And if the Bengals can be, 500 and Joe Burrow gets back with a month left, they finish the season. Let's say they play the Jets, so they're going to be 4-4 most likely, unless the Jets upset them. Which honestly, it kind of feels like it could happen because you steal one on Thursday Night Football, long week. Everybody's like, oh, the Jets can't win. And it just kind of feels like that's a game the Jets could win, unironically. But let's say they do get to 4-4, and they can get to, 6-6, 7-6. If they get to 7-6, Joe Burrow comes back. Their final 4 games, Ravens, Dolphins, Cardinals, Browns. There is a good chance, probably a 50% chance that all 4 teams are done. Ravens, a little dicey. I'm a Ravens fan, so I'm holding out hope. But there's a good chance the Ravens have 7, 8, 9 losses at that point. And if that's the case, Lamar's probably going to sit out. The team's going to get blown up. And Dolphins, there's a good chance that they consolidate their team by Thanksgiving. The Cardinals, a very good chance. They're another. Them and the Ravens are probably the 2 teams that might be trying at this point. Cardinals, there's a good chance Kyler Murray's already sat out playing Call of Duty. And Browns, if the Browns are playing in Week 18, I'd be stunned. So you could go 7-6 and have 4 cakewalk games. Look, 11-6 is possible. Most likely a 10-7. But all you need to do, if you can get to 7-6, if Joe Burrow comes back and the Bengals are a wild, they might win the division at 10-7, honestly, because Ravens are gone. Steelers they already have a win over. If they can beat the Steelers again, which would be with Joe Flacco, so it's going to be tough. But look, the Bengals team could be a sleeper playoff team. You don't want to play them. And Joe Flacco is the perfect backup. If you've got let me extrapolate on that. If you have good weapons, and you're going to be a short-term backup. Now, if he plays the whole season, if he plays the playoffs, he's not, at this point in his career, he cannot win a Super Bowl. It's not going to happen. But if you've got dominant offensive weapons, and Flacco needs to step in for 5 to 6 weeks, you can put up points, like what we saw, and you can win half your games. Now, there's other quarterbacks that are kind of the reverse, that Justin Fields, for example, he is if you've got a good defense, and maybe a good running back, the Broncos per se, something like that. Justin Fields is a good quarterback in that situation, and the Broncos have decent weapons, I will admit, but Justin Fields feels like the kind of backup that can run a 60-yard touchdown off a scramble, and if the defense only gives up 17, Justin Fields could get lucky and put up 18, 19, 21, 24. So you got different backups depending on your team. But Joe Flacco, look, if he's got good weapons, he can put up points for sure. So Joe Flacco's he's the man. Now, on to the Giants, who did lose. I was writing this more excitedly while they were winning against the Broncos, but they're 2-2 with Jackson Dart. They won both of their home games. They lost both of their road games. It's okay. He's a rookie. You got Cam Scatterboo, who's also a rookie. Now, they do have a tough stretch, I will admit. At Eagles, Bears, 49ers, Packers, Lions. That's a tough stretch. That is a tough stretch. That could be the top 5 teams in the NFC, and a few of them are on the road. So if you can go 2-3, that'd be amazing. If you can go 2-3, probably going to go 1-4. You steal one of those. If you go 0-5, it really puts you in a bad mood. You start off 2-2. You beat the Eagles. You beat the Chargers. Phenomenal wins. You almost beat the Broncos on the road. That's a good loss. That's a quality loss. And look, if you can probably not going to beat the Eagles again. If you can beat the 49ers and Packers, or 49ers and Bears, or Lions, if you can beat 2 of those teams, that looks really good. That's a 5. Would you be 4-5 with a close loss? Maybe you can have another couple close losses. 4-5, rookie quarterback on a bad team. Beating some good teams, Chargers, Eagles, let's say Bears, 49ers. I mean, that's you're feeling really confident. That means Brian DeBall stays. Again, he doesn't need to do much winning to keep his job. He stays. Obviously, the quarterback, the running back stays. The owner is probably going to open up his pocketbook. He's saying, "Oh, I can really see the future here." So that's something that's notable. Now, on to 2 things that are not necessarily on the field related. We've got Shedeur Sanders and his Twitter army, and then some stuff about bye weeks. We're going to start with Shedeur Sanders' Twitter army. And there are a lot of people that say that, and partially it's his dad's fault, partially it's his crazy fan base. Shedeur's not really at fault for this, I wouldn't personally say. But there's a lot of people that are saying that Shedeur can't have swag because of his race, that the NFL allows white players to have swag, but because he's not white, he can't have swag. Look, these people don't know what they're talking about. A few athletes who have swag, and what swag means is a little person-to-person dependent. Does that mean being obnoxious? And by no means am I saying Shedeur is obnoxious, but does that mean being cocky? Does that mean being obnoxious? Does that mean being because what does swag mean? Does that mean you wear cool Jordans and rainbow gloves? I mean, what does swag mean? Because that means something different to everybody else. But I'm gonna say swag is just your big voice. You draw a lot of attention, and I'm gonna name some athletes that are black that have a lot of swag. Cam Newton, obviously. Michael Jordan, obviously. Tyreek Hill, obviously. I could name a ton. Probably the majority of people with swag are black athletes because they make up the majority of the league. And now we have some backup quarterbacks, and that's kind of the operative term here, because depending on how good you are, that's how much you can get away with. If Patrick Mahomes did something really bad, if he was not in jail, the Chiefs would keep him. It's as simple as that. Look, if Patrick Mahomes stays out of jail, the Chiefs will continue to play him. If Justin Tucker was making field goals, the Baltimore Ravens would have most likely kept him. The issue was he was a distraction. He had that scandal, and he wasn't playing that good. We've got guys like Kaepernick, back up at that point, Tim Tebow, back up at that point, and Shedeur Sanders, back up at that point, who, whether or not you agree with their cause, whether or not you think you like Tim Tebow praying or Colin Kaepernick protesting, or Shedeur Sanders doing his off-the-field stuff, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which causes you believe in, because the owners, they don't want the drama. They don't want people asking the backup quarterback questions. They don't want the cameras going to the backup quarterback. Look, if you're not, even if you're a starting quarterback, if you're not dominant, if you're not a very good player, they just can't have you around. I'll give you the, unironically, Cam Newton's the perfect example of this, because he was a black quarterback who had a lot of swag, who was really animated, and everybody let it slide. And I personally don't think it's that big of an issue, to be clear, but NFL owners and coaches obviously do. They let it slide because he was an MVP quarterback and was great. Once he became a backup, then it wasn't able to slide, and he became a bit of a distraction. And Draymond Green's a good example of that in the NBA. Look, when he was in his heyday, 2014 to 2019-ish, in that range, people didn't really care. The Warriors were like, oh, whatever, he's going to get suspended, he's going to punch some people. But now that he's not that good, there's a lot of conversations about, oh, do we get rid of him? Do we keep him or Poole? And they still have kept him for sure because he's just good enough to keep up the antics. But there will be a time, probably this season, maybe next season, but very soon, where Draymond Green has too many distractions, too many off the court and on the court issues for you to keep him around. It's just that simple. Look, if you're a great player, you can get away with a lot. If you are not a great player, you can't get away with very much. And at the end of the day, Shedeur Sanders is a backup quarterback who was drafted in the 5th round. You don't really get any margin for error. A small thing as an injury. If you get injured, if you're out for the season, you're probably gone. They don't have any investment in you in terms of them viewing you as a high pick and drafting you high. They don't have much financial investment in you, so they don't really have a reason to need you to start. If you draft a guy number 1 overall, Kyler Murray, especially his situation because he was drafted number 1 overall right the next draft after they drafted Josh Rosen, I believe 12 overall, they need to make it work. The owners, general manager, the coach, and I know the coach is different, but they need to make Kyler Murray work because they gambled a lot of money, a lot of draft capital, and then also saying that the previous draft was a failure. So they need to make him work. His antics, they're like, oh, okay, you want to sit out, you want to play Call of Duty, you don't want to be a leader. Okay, we'll let it slide. So it just depends on who you are on if it's going to slide or not. Now, in terms of the bye weeks, because I had mentioned I had a idea for bye weeks that I think makes a lot of sense because, we've got bye weeks from week 5 to week 14 or 13 or something absurd. And I'm just like, number one, there's the concern with how fair is this and how safe is it, because you get a bye week 5, and then you're going to, especially if you're going to make the playoffs, you're on a long stretch. If you get a bye week 5, you could play 15 games with no rest. And I know there'd be a rest before the Super Bowl, but I guess you go 14 games with no rest, and it's just like, that's a lot of football potentially to be played. So there's the concern of, well, who decides who gets one bye weeks? Apparently they're randomized, but that's a minor concern. I just don't like how throughout the entire season we're missing games. The Ravens and Bills didn't play in week 7. And here's what I think would make sense. I think this would make sense. And if you want to do some sort of Pro Bowl game, probably wouldn't make a lot of sense for NFL's sake, but if you want to do some sort of Pro Bowl weekend, just so there's something on, I'm fine with that. I don't care. I don't need a Pro Bowl weekend. So here's my proposal. Week 8 of the NFL season, and not for this season, it's going to be for next season, but week 8, every team plays on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. So a few things that this does. Number one, it gives everybody because we're going to do a bye week in week 9, which we're going to get to in a second, but this gives everyone a little bit of a longer rest, but it also gives people who traditionally can't come on Sundays for whatever reason, maybe they work on Sundays, maybe they work early Mondays, but this gives people who generally can't come to games a guaranteed, I can go on a Friday. I can make Fridays work. I can make Thursday nights work. And every team is playing Thursday night, Friday night, or Saturday morning, or however you want to do it. But they're all going to play before Sunday. So we've got no games week 8 on Sunday. We've got no games week 8 on Monday. No games week 9. Week 9 is just a total bye week. Everybody's on a bye. Then week 10, no Thursday night games. So what this means is everybody gets more than 14 days rest. Minimum. You get 14 days of rest between your week 8 early game, which is probably going to be on Thursday or Friday night. You're going to get 15, 16 days of rest. I think it makes a lot of sense. Everybody's on the bye week. We can build up some of that tension. All the NFL fans are hungry because, week 1 is so big. It's so monumental because everybody's waiting. We're waiting. Boom, we get football. And then it drags on. I love football, no doubt about it, but we need a mid-season break. If you want to do some Pro Bowl fiasco, whatever, I don't really care about that. I just think from a fairness standpoint, it makes sense. From a viewership standpoint, it makes sense. And also, this is something I didn't even really write a note about, but why are we doing double Monday Night Football games? We need to have 3 or 4 o'clock games, one Thursday, one Sunday night, one Monday night. A primetime game is supposed to be a primetime game. Look, put them all at 1 o'clock. We need to stack the 1 o'clock window every single week with just more games. If we didn't have all these bye weeks every single week, we would have an additional 1 or 2 games of good football. And it's more fair, makes more sense to me, and it builds that tension going into the second half of the season.